Good Monday morning, everybody. We have a ton of good stuff coming up for you today on Gojo and Golic. The Olympics, it's over. We are sad. But don't worry, we're going to talk about Team USA. They went out and got a bunch of golds over the weekend. Got to get into that. Plus, we got our first look at a bunch of rookie quarterbacks in NFL preseason games. We will rank them. And our all-Olympic teams, closing ceremonies, our favorite athletes from Paris. We'll get into all that and more coming up on Gojo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. We will take a look back at the entirety of the Olympics. I am pumped to talk about those rookie quarterbacks that Jesse mentioned. I sat around all week and did nothing but watch preseason football. It was electric. This in the Olympics has been such a great bit of preparation for fall Saturdays and Sundays. I feel like I'm starting to get ready. I feel like I'm starting to get the reps under my belt. And we actually got a fair amount of reps out of quarterbacks like J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. that we can sort of sink our teeth into. It was, I think in my mind, a perfect weekend for rookie quarterbacks in terms of selling hope to their franchises and fan bases. I will explain why once I can make words in a little bit. But Dad, in the meantime, the Olympics has now come and gone. If you were expecting to get up this morning and continue to watch wall-to-wall coverage on the Gold Zone or get to fall in love with some obscure sport, that's no longer gone. But it still feels like, Dad, this is an overwhelming success. Like, I feel like everyone I've talked to, the taste in their mouth coming off this Olympics has been an overwhelmingly positive one. So now that we have seen the closing ceremonies, Tom Cruise has helped pass the baton to Los Angeles for the 2028 games. I don't know. We're going to see a bunch of great TV ratings and big numbers like that, but why do you feel like this Olympic Games felt bigger and worked better than what we've seen recently?
Well, I think because we had fans. You know, you had a venue. You know, unlike Tokyo where it was COVID and there was no fans. You could hear the ball bouncing. You could hear the feet on the track. You could hear all the events and what goes on in the events because there was no crowd. So I think that has a lot to do with it. We're coming off of that even a year late. Instead of 20, it was in 21. So less time before this Olympics as well. And just the bad taste of COVID in general, certainly, you know, around the world. And then to go into the sports world and make it kind of a lonely sports world, I think coming off of that was big. Certainly for the watching in America, the time change, you always have to take that into consideration of what you can see live and what you can see taped. You kind of knew when you were watching live and when was taped. Sometimes it can be somewhat confusing, but I think a lot of that is because we normally win for the most medals. That's nothing new, and we tie with golds with China. So I do think a lot of it is just the contrast of the 21 Tokyo games where there was nobody there. I think that had a lot to do with it.
in terms of Olympic viewership overall for men's basketball in particular for the gold medal round, just using that as kind of a proxy for everything else, 19.5 million viewers on average for this gold medal matchup between the U.S. and France is the most that they've had since the 96 Olympics in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So it's been quite some time, even because you're right, the Tokyo COVID Olympics, you kind of have to put off to the side in terms of all of this. But Dan, I think you're right. I think certainly coming back off that was always going to be a stark contrast. I agree. It was infinitely watchable. The times that it was on over here, even on the West Coast, you could wake up and start your day with live Olympic coverage and go through most of your afternoon, having something to watch and sink your teeth into. I think the Gold Zone continues to be something that people can use to bolster that. But it was also an Olympics that, with very few exceptions, what went on with the River Seine over there and some of the issues and concerns about the contents of that, pollution-wise, really overall, you didn't go in with a bunch of negative headlines either this year, Dad. Usually with the Olympics, much like its counterpart in the World Cup, you've got all this controversy around the builds that have to go up in these countries, a lot of developing nations that view this as an opportunity that sort of mortgage their future for the promises of this being something that bolsters their lives here and now and after the fact, that people figured out kind of doesn't work that way financially. And so for Paris, who didn't have to build a bunch of structures, who didn't have to go outside of who they were as a big-time, huge city that can host events like this, you didn't walk in already feeling kind of bad about it. And when you combine that with the fact that, the U.S. was in the mix for pretty much everything that we usually value over here, that certainly doesn't hurt none either.
No, it doesn't. And I barely watched the Gold Channel. I barely was on that. I thought I would be on that more, but I was on NBC and USA Network. I was flipping back between those two, watching live events during the day, and obviously taped the replay of them at night. That's how I kind of consumed it. But you're right. Paris was a little more ready-made for the venues, just like L.A. Will be. Now, traffic may be an issue in LA in 28.
I was going to say, Paris can tout their public transportation system. Los Angeles, if they are going to get to a place that can work for that, as someone with now 2 years of research, buddy, they are not prepared on that front right now. It is a major difference amongst a few. But you're right. It is a city that is planning on doing this with all the existing structures already there, kind of like Paris did, trying to build it into the fabric of the town. So it is going to be interesting to see, now that they have officially passed the baton, how that's going to work. Dad, did you watch the closing ceremonies at all, by the way? Any of the Tom Cruise stuff get you? I didn't actually check out any of that out.
I did not. I'm sitting watching competitions. I can't really sit and watch the closing ceremonies, but that's on me. I'm sure a lot of people do, enjoy the closing ceremonies. I don't want to say burned out, but I'm used to watching actual events, actual competitions. So just to sit and watch something that's just kind of a goodbye, and just kind of moving along, I wasn't really into. No, I did not watch it.
Well, I didn't watch it in person, but I did see the clips, and it was basically Tom Cruise diving into the closing ceremonies. Yeah. There was a motorcycle, there was an American flag, there were the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then he dropped the Olympic rings onto the Hollywood sign, which, no notes, that was cool. The way it looks when it says Hollywood and then there's the Olympic rings, that's pretty cool. Even if you don't like Tom Cruise, like some people, that way.
It is funny. No, I was thinking about that.
It was cool.
I'd been at a party that weekend where we were debating how they were going to incorporate the Olympic rings into the Hollywood sign, because that was everyone's guess that turned out to be absolutely correct. But much like our Olympic men's basketball team that we'll get to here in a second, it is funny that all of the people used in and around the promotion, maybe accounting for the demographic of people sitting and watching the Olympics, it's Snoop Dogg, Martha Stewart, Flavor Flav, Tom Cruise, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, like no one that's actually been day-to-day relevant in the ways that we think of with stars in God knows how long, but have all been in part the faces of this Olympics. And so, America being like, all right, we have to get our ambassador, Tom Cruise, ready to help usher in the 2028 games in Los Angeles. Dad, I don't know, it was sort of hilarious to me. Maybe it hit home for you because these were people that have been much more popular during the majority of your adult lifetime.
Yeah, but that is interesting. You know, in an era of younger athletes, 20-some athletes, I would say overall. Obviously, you have some 30-some athletes as well. But to have, as you mentioned, Flavor Flav, Snoop, Martha Stewart, Tom Cruise, my era people, kind of as the faces of it was somewhat odd. Because you had viewership. Now, is it older viewership? Does the younger viewership, just watch? One of the big differences is social media. You know, all the athletes having TikTok. So that's the younger generation, jumping in on the TikTok world and the social media world, while the older generation is flipping through the stations, whether it's NBC or USA or Peacock, or my era going to Peacock and streaming, and then watching the Gold Channel.
I do think that's not insignificant, though, Dad. The Olympics this year in particular met everyone where they were. Like, you're right. If you were a person who wasn't inclined to be online or be into all this streaming, you could still get it. It was NBC. It was a place that's warm and familiar to you.
Yep.
If you are someone that does enjoy the streaming stuff and the attention span eater of the Gold Zone, hey, we've got that for you. We watched Simone Biles and her crew after the Olympic U.S. women won the all-around in gymnastics, immediately planning their TikToks. We had whole segments on this show about the popular TikToks from the Olympic Village. And so if you were someone that just wanted to consume it that way, hey, it was ready-made for you there. So that's also a good point, Dad.
I think it's along the ways in our major sports in the NBA, why the NBA stuck with Amazon over TNT, who said they matched the amount that Amazon was going to pay, even though the NBA said no, they didn't really match. TNT is saying they matched. That the NBA wanted to go start streaming. The NFL is streaming, on Amazon and will be on Netflix. So the NBA will stream to meet a younger audience. So I think they wanted to jump into the streaming world. And I think you make a good point about these Olympics. It was on regular TV and it was streaming. So you kind of encapsulated everybody into it.
Well, wherever and however you consumed it, one of the things we all walked away after this weekend enamored with was what happened with the U.S. men's basketball team. So, Dad, as we'll talk about, really, we had a big three of finishes this weekend for us in the U.S. between the men's and women's basketball teams and the U.S. women's national team in soccer that all brought home gold in the events that always have felt like ours. And for the men's basketball one in particular, Dad, this felt big in a way that I'll be curious to see how sticky it ultimately is. The U.S. manages to take down France in a very close game. We thought coming off the semifinal match against Serbia, where the U.S. had to come back and fight tooth and nail, that walking in as a 15.5, 16-point favorite into the final, this would be a wash. But Wemby and France once again have pushed the U.S. to the brink, and it was Steph bleeping Curry, Dad. 9 3-pointers in the semifinals for 36 points, 8 of 12 on triples in the gold medal round for 24 points, including a flurry of them at the finish. And it legitimately had me wondering, Dad, like, this is these sports talk in my body just erupting out of my cells, but it did make me wonder, for an event like this that we all enjoyed, that we loved wrapping ourselves in the flag for and battling against these other countries, watching Steph Curry give the night-night treatment to everyone in his only Olympic moment. This is one and done for him. He is an Olympic gold medalist, and he walked in and he put his stamp on it immediately. Is this something that actually registers enough with us to be a Steph Curry legacy bolstering moment, where now when we fit him for whatever basketball's version of the gold jacket is after the fact, we will point to this on the Mount Rushmore of career highlights now for him?
Yeah, I do think it is, because it wasn't his third or fourth goal like Durant and LeBron. It was his first. It was his only shot. And he did it the way it's not like we're like, oh my God, it was just out of nowhere. We've seen him do this before. Maybe not this many threes in the span of 2 minutes, which was unbelievable, but we've seen him make some crazy threes. So I think just doing it in a different venue. Obviously, it's the NBA, it's the playoffs, it's the finals, and now you're the only other venue he could have is the Olympics. And I think because it was his only one, we hadn't seen him do it 2 other times. We saw him do it in a Olympics where he wasn't shooting great from 3-point land before the last 2 games, of hitting 9 against Serbia and 8 against France. He was not shooting the 3 ball well. And then when crunch time came, which is why one of the reasons he's going to go down as the greatest shooter of all time, he does it in crunch time as well, that this will be remembered. I think it will. And remember, the Basketball Hall of Fame encompasses everything. It's not like the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is just the NFL. The Basketball Hall of Fame incorporates international play, Olympic play, a college play, NBA play. It encompasses everything. So it's a hell of a resume now for Steph.
It is something about timing and style that makes this really interesting. Because you're right, Anthony Edwards joked after the fact. He's like, yeah, Steph only got here 3 days ago. We're glad his flight got out here, but he was only out here 3 days ago because he was non-existent during the lead up to these last few games as the U.S. got to the knockout stages. But, Dad, you look, LeBron James was the MVP of this entire tournament.
Yes.
When you go and look at it, LeBron James was had his second Olympic triple-double of only 4 in history during the run-up in this tournament, and he was the engine. Every time they needed a big moment or someone to take control, it was LeBron James that did that. Kevin Durant got back once he was healthy and came off the bench and was his usual prolific international basketball self. And then Steph Curry in these waning moments, and it doesn't feel like we will talk about this for LeBron James at all. This seems par for the course for what he's done. But, Dad, I also think it's a testament to Steph Curry and his style of play. The reason the Splash Brothers became such a phenomenon, the reason we've talked about these changes in basketball is in part because he's made the three, something that can seem cold and formulaic at times, something this exciting, where he's throwing it up in between 2 French defenders, where we've got that picture of him draining one over an outstretched Victor Wembanyama, and all of a sudden it makes you marvel, and he's got a knack for doing it in clutch like he did here that makes it so sticky in everybody's mind and does give this a chance. I think of this being a Mount Rushmore Steph Curry moment when it's all said and done for him.
Point play is a big play. To have it be
Dad's blushing right now. He was too excited about the 3-point play. But yeah, I just think, Jesse, that's sort of a fascinating subplot for this is the fact that we've had this Steph Curry 3-ball discussion, but to see it again distilled down into this, where you could argue maybe even of LeBron, Steph, and KD, he might have been during the majority of the tournament, like sans that last game, the third best of that trio in terms of the importance that he had to that run. And now, as I think we've gotten Dad back here, Dad, he managed to get through all that, where I said during the majority of the run, he might have been the third best player. And then in the semifinal and final round, all of a sudden, his importance and given the importance of those moments, all of a sudden vaults him.
Yeah, so I don't know where I fell off, but, he makes splash plays. Splash plays are significant in the world of sports today, where LeBron is just consistently great, winning the MVP. LeBron does things that you're expecting him to do: score, rebound, assist, make incredible blocks, while Steph does his thing. He hits his threes, and he wasn't doing it early in the tournament, but he did it when it counted the most. What's going to be interesting is replacing Durant, who's 35, Steph, who's 36, and LeBron, who's 39, because they played the most minutes, 32, 31, 30. Nobody else was in the 30-minute range, and these are your oldest guys, and these guys aren't going to be around for the next Olympics in L.A. So who is going to be the ones
Durant
that step
hasn't
up?
ruled it out yet. Kevin Durant being, he would be 39, so he would be LeBron's age at the next Olympics. He has not ruled this out. He's an Olympic junkie. He's a guy that's the best, statistically, we talked about it, past the all-time scoring mark by Lisa Leslie in this Olympics for a player on Team USA and in their program. So, but you are right, Dad. And staring down on the other side of this, we can talk more about this later if we want, but Victor Wembanyama had, 26 points in this finals matchup and did not look deterred. Yeah, he had 26 points in this game off 3 of 8 from beyond the arc, 11 of 19 overall, and just looked unafraid and was defiant after the game. And you've seen this French team gain confidence as now this has been back-to-back Olympics where it's been them in the U.S. sitting at the top of the mountain. And now with what momentum they've had in the draft, you had the 1 and 2 pick in this last year's draft come out of France. You had Wemby before that. There's another prospect coming down the pipeline this year. They've got a bunch of great young players that they're going to get to build around, while maybe the rest of the world starts to lose this luster or fear of what the U.S. has been traditionally.
Yeah, you talk about the draft picks. So you're talking about young players. In the last 2 drafts, they've had 5 lottery picks, including Wemby and the 2 from this year. So 5. And as you mentioned, another one coming up in this draft looks like to be a lottery pick. So they do look to be a team that is growing. And I think, quite honestly, that helped the ratings, it being a close game. We're used to the men's team and the women's team blowing teams out. But as we'll get to the women's game in a bit, which was an unbelievably close game, which was totally unexpected, at least from my, casual watching eyes. They were both excellent games. The women's soccer game was a good game. So you can see why the ratings were what they were.
It's incredible. To your point about the dominance on the men's side, since 2004, Team USA is 36-1 at the Olympics, with the lone loss coming to France in pool play back in Tokyo. So it has been that dominant of a run, and it will continue to be, at least for right now. We'll see coming up in 2028 what that looks like. Congratulations to Team USA. We'll talk about the women and the soccer team in a bit. But coming up next, why everyone should probably be excited by what they saw from their rookie quarterback this weekend in the NFL. Next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Jesse Cofield here, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here as well. Fellas, Caleb Williams made his debut for the Bears over the weekend in that 33-6 win over the Bills in that preseason game. Now, Williams completed 4 of 7 passes for 95 yards, ripped off a 13-yard scramble in 20 snaps, including penalties, on Sunday. Now, wide receiver DJ Moore called the rookie's performance outstanding. Williams was a little bit more measured when he talked about his debut.
Yeah, there is an understanding that it is preseason, that, everybody's not going to show their looks and, what they would do versus. vice versa. It definitely is, it definitely feels good to get out there. Last time I was out there on the field, other than practice, was November 18th, and it's, you go that long without something. It's tough, but it's been great. The guys have made it fun. They made it easy on me.
He went on after that to say, like, he ties his success into his teammates and everything. So saying all the right things, doing all the right things, looking amazing. We saw so many rookies in action, guys, over the weekend. Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. Michael Penix also saw their first NFL snaps. So, obviously, it's preseason, but let's get ahead of ourselves. Who impressed you the most? Who's going to go out and do it this year? Come on, let's overreact. Let's freak out.
Well, Jesse, my overreaction, and Dad, kind of where I sit on this is we know Drake May went earlier in the weekend. I think they were in the Thursday night game. And it was fine. It was a lack of rep situation. That kind of, there's two buckets of quarterbacks from this weekend, right? It was small sample sizes with fun plays and big sample sizes that I think were actually emblematic of the quarterback. Everyone had something this weekend that you could like. And I think the most encouraging part for me, Dad, was that almost all these teams met their young quarterback where they currently are. Because when you look statistically, or even watching the film, watching the game at the weekend, a lot of what you saw from Bo Nix, from Michael Penix Jr., even from J.J. McCarthy, was stuff that they excelled at on the college level that these coaches looked at and said, yeah, let's implement this. I watched Bo Nix throw an RPO touchdown into the flat to a tight end. You know how many times we've seen that from Bo Nix over the last 6 years of college football? And Sean Payton, who certainly, there wasn't a ton of RPO stuff in his offense with Drew Brees, looked at this and said, hey, we're going to put him in the shotgun where he's comfortable. We're going to spread things out like he's used to, and we're going to allow him early on to do the things that will give him success. And I think across the board for a lot of these quarterbacks, that was what stood out the most to me overall.
I think one of the things that helped too was the experience these quarterbacks got in college. You look at a Jaden Daniels, who was a true freshman starter at Arizona State before, ending up at LSU. You have Bo Nix with 61 starts. Michael Penix starting forever at Indiana before Washington. Then J.J. McCarthy and Caleb Williams, both at least 2-year starters in college. So you have guys that have had the experience. So I don't so much look at the stats as I look at their control in the pocket. Are they moving too soon? Are they waiting for the routes to develop? For their second, for their third option, for the dump-off option before they scramble out of there. Caleb Williams making throws on the run was impressive, and he was 4 of 7, should have been 6 of 7. 2 were just flat-out drops of them, including, the downfield drops. So I think that had a lot to do with it, is these quarterbacks have more experience coming in than, say, a Mitch Trubisky who had 13 starts, and a Trey Lance who is still getting his feet wet of starting, in not Power 5 football. So I do think that helps with a quarterback understanding an offense, getting his reads down and maturing faster than quarterbacks who don't have as much playing time in college. I think that helped a lot because all of them were impressive in their own ways. Nobody looked like they were, of the ones we're mentioning, were a deer in headlights. Certainly they weren't perfect, but nobody's going to be. But they looked stable enough, I guess that's a word I'll use, in the pocket and making their reads and going through their progressions.
Yeah, they all did things, again, that we've seen them do before. There is a certain amount of experience and moxie that these guys were going to walk in with. And I want to put Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels sort of off to the side because those were dudes that sort of checked the box, right? Hey, you went out there in limited snaps. Both of them only played about a series.
Right.
Caleb had the one really impressive no-look throw under pressure, dump off to the running back on a screen that had a big gain for them there. He had the throw down the field to Cole Kmet where he broke the pocket and did some of the off-platform arm angle stuff that made Caleb Williams a sensation in college. So he went out there and showed that. He's checked the box in every way. We hear about him on the TB12 diet now, the way he addresses the media. He has very clearly picked the brains of the successful quarterbacks before him and figured out what's going to work. He's approached this like a pro. Jaden Daniels hits the big pass down the field right now, goes out and gives us some of that. We get a rushing touchdown out of him. It's like, all right, check the box. These guys that were the 1 and 2 picks, exemplary talents, went out and showed us that. for J.J. McCarthy, for Bo Nix, for Michael Penix Jr., who we don't think is going to start the season, obviously, because of Kirk Cousins.
Right.
But all these guys that got extended reps, it was fun to see them do the things that were natural. And for Bo Nix, you talk about that experience. The thing that stood out to me for him, he was a guy lined up in the shotgun for 19 of his 21 attempts, just like college for him. 5 of 5 against the blitz for 60 yards. Like, he was not worried and did not panic in situations where under pressure, young guys usually fold. We understand the level of competition they're going against, but 15 of 21 for a $125 and a touchdown. 3 rushes mixed in there. Michael Penix Jr., the interesting thing that stuck out to me, of his passes, 7 of 11 on passes under 2.5 seconds. He got the ball out quick. He made quick decisions, and he distributed and played point guard the way we saw him do at Washington. J.J. McCarthy, 3 of 3 on passes over 20 yards for 99 yards, was spraying the ball deep downfield, especially deep across the middle, where we had seen him be successful at Michigan, going out there and ripping it with a live arm and enough athletic ability to make it viable. Did he have a couple of plays he'd want back? Yeah, the interception was a tough one. Yeah, when he got on the perimeter and got under pressure, he looked a little bit rattled, but those are going to be the mistakes that come for young players. I think you're so encouraged by the top-end stuff that you saw that even for J.J. McCarthy, who we still believe, hey, probably won't be the starter week 1, but man, if this is the first look at him and he can continue to improve, and it sounds like he's going to start the next game for them, he's got a chance to play sooner than later, and you want him to get out there and play sooner than later and work through some of these early mistakes.
Yeah, he and Bo Nix could grab those starting jobs earlier than people thought. Jarrett Stidham was thought to be the starter in Denver, but Bo Nix could overtake that. And J.J. McCarthy, his arm down the field, even Kevin O'Connell said there was no questioning his arm. And again, like we said, nothing perfect, the interception. But boy, he was delivering the ball. And again, I do think the experience in college helped. And do what they do. You mentioned Caleb Williams on the run, making throws, which made him a Heisman Trophy winner. Michael Penix throws on time, because there are going to be times when he's going to have to makeshift something, and that's where he had struggled, supposedly. So, the more passes he gets out in 2.5 and under, and the timing routes, he is money on that. But it's going to be when these quarterbacks get out of their comfort zone, how do they react?
Exactly, because you're like, I could do this with J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy, under center, 4 of 6 for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. The bulk of his production came in this space that he is used to, being under center and big formations, doing that. Bo Nix, 13 of his 14 passes were under 10 air yards. What did we hear about him? He was a guy that made his living in the short area of the field in college, in a bunch of that RPO stuff. They didn't ask him to push it down the field much, and so that's a great point. This weekend, we saw these NFL teams make their rookie quarterbacks comfortable, and because of that, we got to see the good stuff here. It's when we get to the regular season, and all of a sudden they're facing full-blown NFL defenses, and they're in an uncomfortable situation. What's it going to look like then, and how quickly can they weather that storm?
Yep, that is true, but it also is showing that the coaches, it's not like you become a college quarterback and go to the pros and you say, okay, forget everything you did in college. You're going to learn a pro system now. These coaches are using their talents from college to the pro game and to help them get themselves acclimated to the game. But as you mentioned, regular season defense is a little bit different. So the acclimation process is going to continue big time.
You're right, though. It is encouraging because for so many years, offensive coordinators especially went square peg into round hole no matter what, and we have definitely seen a change in the times around the league on that front.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. The U.S. women's basketball team, like the men, survived France to win gold. It was their 8th consecutive gold medal, and it's going to be a memorable one because they got it literally by inches. Okay, they survived a serious test from France by a 67-66 margin, and only because Gabby Williams heaved at the buzzer that banked in a possible shot for the ages was taken with her foot on the 3-point line, denying the home team a chance at overtime, giving the U.S. the win. They did it, okay? It was the 61st consecutive Olympic win, 8th straight gold medal, like I said. Also, 6th career gold for Diana Taurasi. Guys, this felt really significant for the U.S. women's national team. There was all that Caitlin Clark buzz going into this. I mean, it feels like they did what they set out to do and the right choices were made to get them there.
Yeah, and you had star performances from everyone that did make their way over there, right? Obviously, A'ja Wilson was the sensation we were used to. Shout out to Notre Dame's own Jackie Young, who played a huge role in everything that had gone on. Kahleah Copper had a monster game in the gold medal round that prompted A'ja Wilson to use some fun language that I'm sure is going to piss some people off, but fired me up when she was asked for the one word to describe Kahleah Copper and what her performance in that gold medal round was. But, Dad, this was way more of a fight than I think any of us expected for the U.S. women going up against France. And what a cool moment. Like, I understand we're glad that we ruined their moment and dashed their dreams thoroughly on the biggest stage humanly possible, but very cool for France that the host nation had both of their basketball teams represented in the finals with a very real chance at different junctures for both of them to win this thing.
Up 10 points in the third quarter on our women's team. I don't think anybody saw that. I thought everybody thought this was going to be a blowout. And France had a couple of WNBA women who didn't play the past year, so they could play together as a nation and practice together as a nation to be ready for this. I think this surprised a lot of people, including Team USA, I think, to a point, to be down 10 in the third quarter and have to make a comeback. Kahleah Copper, as you mentioned, in the fourth quarter was absolute money. Her coming off the bench with 22 minutes, Kelsey Plum with 21 minutes off the bench, both with 12 points, were big toward the end, and all the way to the end. And, I mean, Gabby Williams, you could see her trying to shuffle her feet. I think that was 3.8 seconds ago when USA was up 3, and France inbounds the ball, and then the young lady throws it to Gabby Williams, who catches it right on the 3-point line. And you could see her trying to shuffle her feet backwards as she's throwing up a shot, and it banks in. You're like, oh my God. I mean, right as the buzzer's going off, but you could see that her foot was over the line and it was going to be a 2-pointer. But, I mean, half a shoe size of it going into overtime. I mean, that was, you can't get any closer than that.
The ensuing fallout of all of the current WNBA players that weren't over in Paris now trying to recruit Gabby Williams back to the W for their team too. Yeah. Noah Eagle being clear-eyed through all of it. Shout out to Noah, man. Saw the step on the line immediately and didn't let that fumble his final call for this game. As the U.S. women, like, by winning this medal, it was the 40th medal in Paris. It tied us with China. This was a big deal in terms of the result meaning something for the medal count here overall. And, Dad, that's kind of the story of this Olympics, too. Overall, the performance from the female and the women athletes at the games. Paris is the first games to have an equal number of men and women competing overall in the Olympics. And I saw this stat from NBC News. If the American women were their own nation, they would have won the third most medals behind only the U.S. and China. So that's the kind of performance that we saw and the dominance that can come when you do support and foster athletes that have been great and just needed the platform and the resources to continue to go show that.
Yeah, I mean, incredible performance by the women, by all of USA, but really by the women. We end up winning 126 medals to China's 91, so dominant in the total medal account. But as you mentioned, they were the last event, the last gold medal after the men, then the women, and the women's soccer all getting gold to help tie China. But you're right, the women's performance have been stellar. In these Olympics. Hey, overall, they were fun. As we mentioned in the first segment, they were fun to watch. I enjoyed it, and they were fun to watch because of the timing. I know that helped, and because of multiple ways you could see it, but it was a good watch all the way around.
It was. So you had the U.S. women's basketball squad taking home gold in dramatic fashion with that team. Diana Taurasi passes her old friend and UConn mate Sue Bird for the most medals by a woman for the U.S. women's national team all time, with now 6 gold medals. And DT was one of the older players on the roster that got talked about some when the Caitlin Clark debate was going on. And Dad, I think it's kind of the best of both worlds for Team USA now, because you graduate some parts of this roster that were older that I'm sure by the time we get to LA won't be around there, and the Caitlin Clarks and Angel Reese and this pipeline of incredible young players that you've got on the women's side. We've talked about, on the men's side, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Cooper Flagg coming up the ranks right now. Who's going to take up this mantle as we graduate the big three from that side? On the women's side, the picture is a little clearer of who's up next, and it gives everyone a fair amount of confidence that this standard that has been a top flight standard, much like the men's side, is going to be able to continue into the future.
Yeah, I think the women's team certainly changes by some number of players with the youth that are ready to jump on this team, as Diana Taurasi will be off. And she went from starter to not playing in this gold medal game at all. Starter at the beginning of the Olympics to coming off the bench to not playing at all. So she got her 6th medal, and I think we can breathe a sigh of relief that we got that gold medal, even though I don't think her being on the team and not playing was the difference of having somebody else on the team and play. We still had enough talent, obviously, to win the medal, the gold medal. So, but I do think this team will have probably, I don't know if I want to say the least amount of changes compared to the men, though the men will have more. We don't know if Durant will come back, but there possibly could be the 3 guys that led the team the most could be off, where for the women, the women that led the team could be back.
Yeah, we could get a lot more familiar faces on that side. I do think you're right. And faces that are already established and quality players. It is encouraging, though, Dad, to see what happened for the U.S. women's national team soccer-wise, because it had been a while since the U.S. had won gold on that stage. And in big competitions outside of the 2019 World Cup, the U.S. had failed to capture gold in any of those major events since then. And so for the U.S. women's national team that was led by a much younger group of stars, when you look at Trinity Rodman and Sophia Smith, able to go out there and capture gold on the big stage, I laughed. There was a People magazine article where Trinity Rodman and Sophia Smith had told reporters that 2 days before the match, they were too young to remember the last time that the U.S. had won gold in London of 2012. So this is a generation that had grown up hearing nothing but, hey, the U.S. women's team, were they falling behind? Were they falling short of what that standard had been worldwide? And so to see them get back on the top is a reminder that no, we're capable of replenishing, restocking this, and then going out and still accomplishing in the same way we've been used to.
Yeah, the first Olympic final in 12 years. They had been on a little bit of a downfall. Mallory Swanson to throw in there with Trinity Smith and Trinity Rodman and Sophia Smith on that. Trinity Rodman and Sophia Smith and Mallory Swanson started all the games and turned out to be a pretty ferocious threesome there. So. You knew the men's team had a ways to go to build back up, but the women's team we're used to seeing as a dominant force in the world, and it had fallen off a bit to maybe some question marks as you're changing the old guard to the new guard. But this maybe rights the ship a little bit before the next World Cup. And before the next Summer Olympics in LA. We'll see. Time will tell, but it certainly went in the right direction.
A group so good they got a nickname. The Trident, I believe, was what they dubbed themselves and started going by the end of this tournament. So I think the Trident works as a nickname. That's pretty cool.
The Trident.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, I love a Trident. I mean, think of the shirts and things that you can make out of that.
Oh, merch. Senior going right to merch. Yes. I like that.
Yep.
Hey, listen. It sells. We're talking about being the faces of these sports. And in an Olympics where, like we talked about, the women were the faces of this Olympic Games. And I think that's something we're going to have to get used to more and more. The merch for the Trident will be flying off the shelves, if that's any indicator. Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here. Coming up, we'll get back to a little more Olympic men's basketball off the top of the next hour as Bill Ryder is going to join us, NBA insider for CBS Sports HQ, to talk about some of the maybe effects of this lingering over into the NBA season from what we saw with Team USA. Of course, we've got to talk about the Jason Tatum situation, who I actually think acquitted himself remarkably well in terms of his response to everything that's happened. I think we have to separate the fact that so much of that conversation was about what other people were talking about relative to Jason Tatum. When he was asked himself, I actually thought he was remarkable in the way that he addressed that in a way that wasn't a distraction, was incredibly human. So I'm excited to talk to Bill about that, because I do think Jason Tatum actually deserves a bunch of credit for how he handled what was objectively a tough situation for somebody of his stature in the league. But Deb, we talked a little bit about some of the preseason games from over the weekend, and the Dallas Cowboys were the nightcap yesterday, playing out here against the Los Angeles Rams. They had been in training camp out here. They had done some joint practices together. And man, I was not ready for just how much Trey Lance we were going to get to see yesterday. The former San Francisco 49ers top pick that's now been the Dallas backup, as they got him on a bargain bin deal last year. Dad, we saw him go out there and throw it 41 times in a game that they ultimately lose to Stetson Bennett, who, give him credit, threw 4 picks and four really bad picks in extended action for the Rams yesterday. As, by the way, right now, because Jimmy Garoppolo, the backup quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, is currently suspended for violating the NFL's performance-enhancing policy, you have Stetson Bennett, in theory, as the backup on this roster. Dresser Wynn is the only other quarterback outside of Matthew Stafford. So they wanted to get a look, and I have to imagine are a little bit concerned with what they saw from Stetson Bennett yesterday. But, Dad, it was him versus Trey Lance for the majority of the day. I don't know how much of that you watched or took in, but Dallas also clearly trying to get a look at what else they've got in the quarterback room as Dak Prescott sits there on the cliff and on the edge of free agency.
This was so odd for a preseason game where everybody plays, where you're switching out after every few series. Now, sometimes quarterbacks will get extended play into series, but to have Trey Lance throw it 41 times, Stetson Bennett 38 times, though the only two, Cooper Rush was 2 for 3, so he barely played. It was 2 quarterbacks playing basically the entire game. One was the entire game. So that was surprising, and wouldn't shock me if the Rams went out there and grabbed themselves a veteran backup, because knowing to be a little shaky and without Garoppolo for the first few games. So that may be exactly why they played Stetson Bennett for as long as they did, to kind of get a gauge for that. And Trey Lance, some good, some bad with him as well. You said, I know we're going to talk about Jerry Jones, but you look at non-quarterbacks who've come in and did well. How about the 6th-round pick for the Rams, just loading up on another receiver, Jordan Whittington. I mean, the 6th-rounder from Whittington, the 6th-rounder from Texas, 6th-rounder from Texas, had 6 catches for 76 yards. He was showing some speed, some power. He was pretty impressive. Now, I know it was the first preseason game. I get it, but there are other players outside of the quarterback, that are out there trying to impress, and this kid impressed.
Yeah, I think Jordan Whittington, and too, a lot of the preseason games right now are also, especially for the more dedicated fan bases, watching who in the preseason games matches the buzz that they've had or hadn't had in camp. Some of these guys pop in the game, and all of a sudden coach turns it on and says, hey, we need to get this guy more rep. With Puka Nacua on the sideline right now in training camp for the Rams, Jordan Whittington's gotten a fair amount of reps, and when I was out there, he was getting talked about in the time since I've heard he's been buzzing in camp, and he was the guy that was the great possession third receiver in a Texas offense that had 2 options that were more talented in Xavier Worthy and Xavier Worthy, the speedster, and then A.D. Mitchell, who's now also with the Colts. And now he's slotted into what could be a very productive role in that opposite Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp in this offense. So, yeah, Dad, Jordan Whittington was a star in this game, no doubt. And for Stetson Bennett, he hadn't played any football or been around since August of last year and stepped away due to personal reasons. for last season. So he's working himself back into form. Maybe they'll give him time because he's been around that organization for a bit, but there is definitely some cause for concern there. For Dallas, you mentioned Cooper Rush is going to be the backup. We saw him go out there and in backup stead for this team be incredibly, so much so that Jerry Jones started trying to sell us on quarterback controversy for a little bit, lest we not forget that era of the 5-game Cooper Rush stretch for them. But for Trey Lance, he was kind of like we've talked about with these Pittsburgh quarterbacks, a buy low, very high ceiling potential of a guy that, hey, if you got him in your system and were able to develop him some, for a guy in Trey that still hasn't played enough football to go out here and erase some of the flaws to his game, you saw the talent, you saw the way he jumps when he leaves the pocket there, you saw the arm strength, but to your point, some of it's the limitations of that portion of the roster where the Dallas offensive line is pretty thin in trying to protect him. Obviously, we've talked about the skill weapons sans CeeDee Lamb are also lacking, which does make it even more interesting that Jerry Jones once again decides to take this weekend and try and hijack attention, addressing CeeDee Lamb yet again after the comments last week where we heard him saying, hey, there wasn't a sense of urgency around getting it done. Jerry Jones was asked about that before the game this weekend and had this to say about CeeDee.
What it is no, there's not that urgency. Now, I understand completely the angst that's happening when you are anxious about and someone says anything about whether you're missed or not. Well, CD, you're missed, okay? But you're not missed out here competing, and it doesn't put any pressure any place on us.
So, Dad, Jerry trying to make it abundantly clear what you're doing is not going to force us to the table any quicker because we're not worried about you being out there in the preseason because we trust that you and Dak have enough reps under your belt to where this will still be a seamless transition at the beginning of the year. Do you believe him?
Oh, I still think what I said last week, that he controls the narrative, that the owners control the narrative, that CeeDee Lamb is going to make his $17.99 million this year, and he's not going to not make that, so he's going to eventually play there. So this was just Jerry trying to reword his saying we do miss him in the long run, not on the field here competing in a preseason game, but in the long run we miss him, trying to assuage that situation a little bit, even though I still believe what I said last week, that he is an owner controlling the situation.
Yeah, well, I think they've got the rules on their side like we've always talked about, but him continuing to finger wag in the face of his second most important player, maybe third opposite Micah Parsons, is just still perplexing to me because this was demeaning in public, quite honestly. I know he was saying, yeah, we miss you, but it was also that reminder of, but there's no rush for us right now because we know you're going to be here when it matters most. And so for CeeDee Lamb, who last time on Dragon Ball Z we saw quote tweet the Jerry Jones statement about him and have Micah Parsons tweeting it, like the players are noticing all of this and it has clearly rubbed them the wrong way. And I know Jerry doesn't care and doesn't have to care, but he stands on the cusp of losing this team, especially if their quarterback walks in a pretty famous way.
I agree. I mean, if your quarterback walks, CeeDee Lamb again, they can control with the franchise tag next year. But you have Micah Parsons that you're going to have to deal with as well. So at some point, you have too many players to deal with, and if you have a bad rep as an owner, now again at the end, money talks, and eventually, if Dallas gives it out, then a player will be happy they got the money. But boy, they feel like they have to work for it more than other teams, than what they have to go through, the public humiliation, if you want to call it that. That word's probably too strong, of what they have to go to get what you feel you're worth when you're near the top of the position.
And when you play the important positions, like we're talking about quarterback and wide receiver right now in the NFL, it's not like we're talking about left guard where I've got to sell you guys on how important that is. Everyone's paying wide receivers right now. Quarterbacks are getting more money than God left and right. And think about this, Dad, how Jerry Jones has decided to go about these negotiations, going back to Dak's last contracts, I think has absolutely seeped into this, where now you've got a quarterback in Dak Prescott who feels like he's got enough of an axe to grind, where there is no dollar amount I would accept if I were him going into a season where free agency is on the other side of this. Now, a lot of other quarterbacks, they like the franchise. They like what it gives them. Dallas is fun for players in the off-the-field stuff. Most would sign the deal. Dak has been so put off by all of this so consistently that he said, bleep that, I'm going to get mine. Hour number 2 of Gojo and Golic here. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. Plenty of fun stuff coming up today. We'll take a little look ahead. The AP Top 25 poll for college football set to come out today, so we'll take a look at our crystal ball and see where we think a lot of the best teams in the country going to wind up in that, as we are mere weeks away now from the start of college football season. We'll also give you, to put a bow on the Olympics, our all-weekend team, our all-gold medal team for the Olympics that were coming out of Paris. But if we're going to talk about that, we have said basketball was the story of the weekend overall. So to help us out with that, NBA insider over at CBS Sports HQ, Bill Reiter, kind enough to join us now here. And Bill, were you like us, just sitting here in awe of Steph Curry, trying to figure out if this is a legacy bolster coming off of one of the most impressive final couple minutes we've seen even from him?
Good morning. I was, and I thought I was done. I thought I was past being in awe of Steph Curry. I covered every one of his finals. Obviously, it's an all-time great run for him as an individual. Maybe you get a little hardened. Maybe you get a little sort of too much in that journalism mode where you've seen it all, you've done it all, you've covered all the Super Bowls, all the finals, and the things. Yeah, I was a kid again. I was screaming at my TV. I was in disbelief. I was walking with my 12-year-old son. He was jumping up and down, and I realized I was doing the same thing at 46. So it bolsters his legacy. It was obviously, for our country, for USA, an incredible moment. And as an individual performance, there's no kind of pressure. Where it's gold or nothing, it was pure magic from one of the most magical players certainly I've ever covered in life.
Were you surprised that the bulk of the I guess, tournament came from our oldest players in LeBron, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant?
It's a great question. It's a yes and a no. So had you told me going in that's the way it was going to be, I would have been surprised, especially LeBron. It was all that gray there in the beard before. I mean,
yes.
I covered the guy.
It's a great look.
New to me. It's like he aged 10 years in the Olympics. But in retrospect, and I don't know how much you guys want to get into Steve Kerr and some of the rotations and how close those games were and the rise of the international game. But it turns out, if we're being, I think, fair, critical, and giving praise, that USA played as a fully functioning team, the way that Serbia did, the way that France did, the way that some of the other squads did. And so we were going to win. We always had the gulf between our talents and the closest team is really wide. But when you don't have the right rotations, when you look like your rhythm's off a little bit, when you start slow out of the gate, which we did, it comes down to individual excellence. And in retrospect, it was always going to be, because they handle the pressure, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, LeBron James, who have, I think 10 rings between them. And for me, at least, Steph and LeBron are two of the best 5 or 6 or 7 players in the history of the game. And that's what you need, those guys, even if they're old, to step up when the team itself didn't at least live up to the expectations of dominance certainly I had for them going into the tournament.
Let's get into it then with Steve Kerr, because he did seem to be the punching bag. And I'd say the negative headline outside of the Tatum the questions about Tatum minutes, it seemed to be in some of these bigger games about Steve Kerr rotations. How much of that criticism is justified, and how much of that is just the difficulty of managing a roster with this much talent that doesn't play together nearly as much as its foreign counterparts?
Look, I think some of it's legitimate. I guess I'll start at the end. I'll begin with the ending. And that is, when you win the whole thing, no one's going to remember that Tatum had, and I think they're inexplicable, 2 DNPs. I mean, that was just bizarre. Nobody's going to remember maybe those slow starts that you had. He is, and we all are, but Steve Kerr in particular, in terms of criticism, is very fortunate. USA, in particular, won that Serbia game, but won gold. I think the criticisms are fair. And I was talking to some folks around the NBA, some executives, many of whom like Steve Kerr. He's a beloved guy, unless maybe you're a Warriors fan. I'm sure you know Warriors fans who watch him every day. Have made these complaints for years. And that's what happens when you get spoiled with excellence and you look for something to critique. But the people I talked to pointed out, and I think this is real, that Steve Kerr's strength, our culture building, our understanding the concepts and the talents of his individual players and weaving those into a team, are creating from champions, the division more that Pat Riley talked about. The ability not to kind of give into the bad habits when you succeed comes over a long time. Helps to have Steph Curry. Of course, every great coach in the NBA needs a great player. And this is the Olympics. You're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 games. If you're lucky, can define your entire 4-year success in the events. But for me, right, Eric Spoelstra is probably better programmed to be an Olympics coach than Steve Kerr, because Eric Spoelstra is kind of a hard ass, kind of a hard case, right? He's amazing, probably the best in the NBA. Other coaches will tell you the best in the NBA at in-game adjustments and decision-making. So, yeah, I think the criticism for Steve Kerr are probably fair. I still think this event doesn't play to its strength. And so you look to Grant Hill, you look at all the people who made the decisions to fill out the roster the way they did, and to pick Steve Kerr. He was always going to have some struggles with how the Olympics work because he's not as good at managing rotation and some of those things as some other coaches on his Olympic staff and just in the NBA.
So do you think the criticism is fair enough that the next Olympics he would not be the coach?
I do. I'm not sure that fairness has a lot to do with it. I think politics and perception play a role. I think it'll be interesting to see whether Steve Kerr wants to be there. But yeah, if Grant Hill, who won't do this, called me and said, Ryder, what am I going to do? It's, hey, big guy, you gotta pull the Band-Aid off and you got to go with someone else. Not because Steve Kerr's not a Hall of Fame coach. He is. Not that he's not a great guy. He's a great guy. I just don't think this event plays to his strengths. And by the way, that's true for some guys that are maybe on the roster in 4 years. John Morant is a top 12 American player in 2028, but the way that FIBA sort of works and so all the sort of peculiarities of it, I'm not sure John Morant's as good as some other guys we could have. I would make that argument to Grant Hill. The criticism's fair. And I think the international game is going to be so much better in 4 years. I think the competition is going to be so much more difficult to get past, and we're not going to have LeBron unless he's actually immortal. We're not going to have Steph. We're not going to have, I don't think, KD. He said, we'll see. It's going to be a harder road to navigate, and I would not want to personally have Steve Kerr be the guy at the wheel of that.
You mentioned John Morant, but who are the other names that you're keeping an eye on that are going to need to ascend into more of a leadership role by then, whether they're guys on the team now or other players around the NBA and coming up that you've got your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the guys that are on the roster, Tyrese Halliburton did not play. He hardly played. He's sort of a mascot of this thing, but I'm glad that he was there because if you look at sort of the next iteration of our team, there's not a lot of shooting there. So I think Halliburton will be important just in terms of the three-point shooting that was really important in the tournament. But for me, the face of the team, as best you can guess 4 years out, and the leader of the team is Anthony Edwards. I think he'll keep making those leaps. And 4 years is a long time. Devin Booker, I think, is still going to be one of the critical guys. Anthony Davis will be on the roster. He'll be 34, 35, probably more of a leadership role. And then you get into, Paulo Banchero might be a guy that you'll look at. This kid Flagman's coming out. I know that hasn't been drafted yet. He'll be at Duke this upcoming year. He's somebody I think that you keep an eye on. I think Chet Holmgren's someone that we're going to keep an eye on. So it's a lot of these young guys that we talk about. It's different because if you look at the top players in the NBA and not just Wemby, a lot of these dudes are coming from the international game. And so we are going to have the best roster almost certainly in 2028, but we will not have the level of dominance if our best player is, and it's hard to guess now, but is Anthony Edwards or Devin Booker. Great players. They're not going to be on the level of, say, Victor Wembanyama in 4 years. They're just not.
So we talk about how the world and the other countries have closed the gap. Is it the rest of the countries, or is it more France and Serbia related?
I think it's both. So and this is the sort of perplexing. I mean, I know it was an exhibition game, but we almost lost to South Sudan, or at least they gave us a run that shouldn't have happened. So I think there's two things going on. I think the international game is really, really good because as we pull USA, the NBA players from the international games abroad, other guys fill spots at whatever, Real Madrid or whatever sort of the Russian league where some of the Serbian players played, and they get more experience. But I don't think it's just those two programs, those two countries. They are the preeminent programs. They are the preeminent countries. But Luka Doncic is still going to be like a young enough and sort of available enough guy. We'll see where Giannis is physically. He's got the kind of game that maybe in 4 years if his body doesn't hold up, doesn't do particularly well. But he's still, I think, capable of being a top 5 player. Obviously plays for Greece. So while Serbia is the team to beat for me after France because they have the best player on the face of the earth, and France is going to be really, really good, I don't think you can sleep on the fact that just the entire international game has gotten better, and our team is probably not going to be as formidable on paper as it was this time around.
Yeah, this certainly felt like, and I think I said it when we were watching coming off the Serbia game, nostalgia in real time in terms of the players that were leading our roster, giving us a hit of the good stuff one more time on the way out here. As we're on the way out from the Olympics, again, as we mentioned, Bill Ryder doing a great job over at CBS Sports HQ. What are you working on there at CBS Sports HQ, and what are you keeping your eye on now for this gap in between the end of the Olympics and getting started with the NBA's regular season?
Yeah, thanks. We've got a new podcast with John Gonzalez and Ashley Nicole Moss called Beyond the Arc. It's 5 days a week during the NBA season. So first I'm going to reintroduce myself to my children so they can remember my name. I'm looking forward to a little time off. But for me, the really interesting thing is going to be, and I'll start to make these assessments and make some calls on this in a few weeks when most NBA executives and folks on staff start coming back from their vacations. But I think the West is going to be a murderer's row. The East is interesting. It's more interesting now that Paul George has gone to Philly. I think obviously the Knicks made a bunch of moves, but there are 11 teams that I think can make a reasonable argument to be playoff teams, and I know that there are 12 that are going to make that argument. Sorry, Phoenix. So there are a lot of teams in the West that expect to be really, really good, and I'm excited to sort of get into how that pans out, what that looks like, whether LeBron, who'll be 40 in December, can push through another year. It's been mediocrity for the Lakers, but they made a conference finals a couple of years ago. So what happens in the West, how that shapes up, and how the game starts to transition to a post-LeBron, post-KD, post-Stephen Curry world. We're not there yet, but we're on the brink of it, and this may be the first year where all three of those guys again start to fade in terms of what their teams can do.
Well, let's give a little love to LeBron. Not that he hasn't gotten it over the years,
Amazing.
But I mean, eventually it's going to end. But he's on the best team in the world on Team USA, and he's the best player at 39 years old playing FIBA rules as opposed to NBA rules. So just talk about LeBron and just his ability to adapt and still be on the top of his game.
All right, so this is going to hurt me because I'm a child of Jordan. I grew up between the suburbs of Chicago and Dubuque, Iowa, which isn't far from Chicago. At least you're in Iowa. There's nothing to do. This FIBA thing just reinforced that Jordan's the second best of all time. It's LeBron. I know you having that argument, but you said it. That FIBA is such a more physical game. And watching, LeBron was just banging the hell out of people. He took some of the assignments in that Serbia game in the fourth quarter to just literally almost 40 physically go at Jokic and just try to wear Joker down. They start really covering LeBron with a big break. So I've been around the guy. It's hard to even put into words the ridiculous level which he continues to play. And you're right, he was the best player over the course of that run for the men's team. The difficult Olympics that we faced because of the international game we've talked about. And he's still going. You got the gray in his beard. He's older. He can be a little grumpy like all of us old dudes can be. And he's still remarkable. At least in basketball, we've never seen anything like it.
No, it's truly been a one-of-one experience, and that extended into this last Olympic Games coverage. There's no doubt about that. At Sports Writer, that's REITER on Twitter, is where you can find him. Check him out. Like I said, the podcast over at CBS Sports HQ and plenty of other great work. Bill, we appreciate all the time and the insight this morning, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Bill.
Awesome stuff there. Shout out to the Graybeards, too. I'm glad LeBron, who's got all the money in the world and could easily get him a Just for Men deal and get it out of a box, he's letting the gray ride because, again, Dad, I think he wants everybody to know I am old and I am doing all of this, and thus you should respect it even more as I continue to add to the legacy.
Completely agree. He's letting that gray shine through to show that, I may be old, but I'm still the man. And you know what? He is. He certainly has his detractors. There's no doubt about it. But as I said, to assimilate to the FIBA game, the physical play, because people always say, "Oh, he would never have been able to play in the Jordan years of the physicality." To which I think those are ridiculous comparisons, because if he played in that era, he would have grown up in that era, which means he would have grown up in the physical play era. And at 6'8", 260, he'd have fit in just fine growing up in that era. So I always hated that. Put someone in an era now in an era then. You just can't blindly do that, but not when they would be raised in that era of play.
Yeah, it's been pretty unassailable, but that hasn't stopped the haters. And the haters and doubters were many, especially with this year's Olympic team, and no one noticed more than our guys. So, Jesse, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the wonderful pettiness that we saw online during the totality of this U.S. run.
Yeah, so this team had plenty of fun off the court. It might have been our most online team of all time. They are all first-team online people, okay? So they had it all, right? We had Twitter spats with fans. Loved those. Those are personally my favorite. Playing time drama, we've talked about that. Hate from other athletes. It was truly a wild ride. It had everything. But you could tell that this team was also very close-knit. We have some video of LeBron teasing Anthony Edwards after the win here.
Yeah! Come on, Ed. No, you ain't been there yet.
Gotta show him how it's done.
he's holding that bottle of champagne like what's coming out is poisonous.
Yeah.
You can hear LeBron in the background.
God.
Steph Curry is so used to this. He's letting it fly. And LeBron in the background, if you couldn't hear it, said, "Come on, Ant, we know you haven't been there yet," meaning he hasn't won the title to go and pop the champagne. So that was one of many great moments that didn't make my top 5 viral moments from this year's U.S. men's basketball team run through the Olympics. So I want to start off here, go through 5 through 1. We'll try and burn through these somewhat quick. But like Jesse said, first team all posters here. And that's why I want to start off with our nation's founding father of online athletes, none other than Kevin Durant, throwing shade to Dennis Schroeder, who I don't know if people saw this press conference as widely spread, but Dennis got asked about what he thought was the difference between the European game and the game played over in the U.S. and the NBA. And he said, this isn't a league and this isn't the rest of the world isn't about the entertainment. It's high IQ basketball. It's what's coached. It's going out there and doing it. And so Kevin Durant responds by posting a picture of the gold medal winners for the U.S. that says entertainment and IQ. Dad, anybody can get it at any time. If you've tweeted about Kevin Durant, you should be worried.
Listen, Kevin Durant, is going to answer on social media, and now he's answering in his own name without a burner. So he's just decided to free himself of the anonymity of it all and just be himself. As Simone Biles rubbed off on him, as he said, you just be himself.
Exactly. Salute to Simone Biles for making it happen. Number 4 on the list, Devin Booker, quietly the unsung hero of this team, was incredibly efficient in the minutes he got here, playing off the other players who were far more ball dominant. And this was a shot that he called himself. Back at September 12th, 2023, Kyle Kuzma tweeted out, USA basketball better get some NBA stars that know how to play a role. Anybody can be nice with the ball in their hands, but can you be cool with defending and going in the corner for a few possessions? To which Devin Booker quote tweeted and said, "I'll do it," and then went out there and actually did it. So I know we talked a lot about minutes in the Olympics. I said Jason Tatum, I thought, responded really well to the limited minutes and when he was asked about it. But for Halliburton and Devin Booker especially, I thought D-Book went out here and called his shot admirably.
Yeah, he called his shot very admirably, as did Halliburton, who barely played.
Yes, Halliburton, number 3 on my list, by the way. Tyrese Halliburton, with the gold medal in the locker room after the game, tweeting out, "When you ain't do nothing for the group project but still get an A," holding up his gold medal. Dad, you love the sense of humor about it. He made the star turn during the in-season tournament this year in the NBA. He is still absorbing all this, so I appreciate him having a good sense of humor here.
And that is a great line that everybody can understand, because there are a number of people out there that said, "Oh yeah, I was in those shoes. I contributed nothing to that group project and I still got the A."
Yes, you and my mom famously combining together in a parenting class that you both got like a D in while trying to cheat together. So appreciate that as the backdrop for my entire life here. Coming up at number 2, it makes sense Kevin Durant would be on this list twice. Kevin Durant, after the Serbia win in the wee hours of the morning at 5:15 local over in Paris, up responding to tweets of people that had supported Serbia, including the iconic line, "Where you from?" in response to Swipe a Cam talking about the Serbian team and their accomplishments in the Olympics. Dad, a perfect note.
Oh, just without question, a perfect note. But not shocking out of Kevin Durant. As we said, he is the king of going after it online and throwing out some shade.
There is no doubt about it. But number 1, couldn't go anywhere else. And shout out to the USA Basketball account for integrating this in as well. But we had seen the A Gift from God viral TikTok song coming off the Serbia game that to me is now the song of the summer. Do we have the TikTok and can we play it for the people?
I'm proud to be an American, 'cause at least I know I'm free. Got a triple-double from LeBron, 36 from Steph Curry, and I proudly stand up next to you as we beat every other country. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless USMET.
Unreal. That was just the best. Absolutely the best.
The song of the summer. USA, USA, USA.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. Guys, the Associated Press top 25 rankings released today for college football. I believe at noon, Georgia earned top billing in last year's preseason AP poll with 60 of a possible 63 first place votes. They're expected to be on top once again, already earning the top spot in the coaches poll released last week. The last preseason number one in the AP rankings to win the national championship was Alabama in 2017 after outlasting Georgia in the finale. So guys, let's do a little over-under with some teams here to see where you think that they will land. Okay, let's start with Alabama. Over under 4.5. Kalen DeBoer stepping into a tough gig here, as we've talked about previously. So path to 10 wins here. Jalen Milroe back under center to lead what should be another high-flying DeBoer offense. So what do we think over under 4.5?
I'll go over on this one, Dad. I think they're at 5 in the coaches poll. I think that's probably going to be the sweet spot here. That was already their lowest ranking in the coaches poll since 2009. I think it was the first time they had been outside of the top 3 since then, which is an insane reminder of the level of dominance that this team enjoyed. But I do think there are legitimate questions about, hey, how does Jalen Milroe assimilate into now a very different offense than what he was running by the end of his time with Nick Saban? Certainly there's a bunch of talent there. The wide receiver room has changed out some there. And defensively, they lost some really important pieces between both of their edge rushers to the NFL draft, Caleb Downs to the transfer portal as he heads to Ohio State, who they'll see at the top end of this as well. So I think they're going to be probably just in that 5-6 range in the polls coming out.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think the thought of all the way to the playoffs, they would have to win the conference to be in the top 5 anyway. But just for preseason, I do believe it'll be over that as well, just for all the reasons that you gave out. We're seeing even teams like Alabama now. Again, there's no more Nick Saban, so especially hitting the portal, losing some wide receivers. But I do think they're still going to be a playoff team. They're still most likely be a playoff team. But I do think it'll be over 4.5.
All right, guys.
Yeah, if they're not a playoff team this year, it's going to get real scary real quick. Jesse, why don't we hit close to home on this and go and try and check out the Irish?
I'm sure you guys can be totally objective on this one. Okay, Notre Dame over under 7.5. So you got Riley Leonard coming in, and Marcus Freeman entering his 3rd full season. What do we think?
I actually would take the over on this, Dad. I think Notre Dame, especially in light of the Jagasa injury at left tackle going into the open, and now Texas A&M got some bad news the other day looking at week 1 for that team. Ruben Owens, their running back, unfortunately looks like going to be lost for the year with a lower leg injury, so he won't be available either in a game where now that's going to be part of the background. But I think this Notre Dame team, Dad, probably in the 7, 8, 9 range, and maybe even factoring that Notre Dame offensive line was already, especially at tackle, a position that was under the radar for everyone because you had lost 2 guys high in the NFL draft this year, how they were going to replace them, and now that group already getting thin before, coupled with, I think, just in general, a lot of really good, interesting teams up near them in that range could bump them below this.
Yeah, I think they'll be top 10, but I think it'll be over 7.5. So I think 8, 9, 10 would be the area. You're going in with a new quarterback. Again, they went in with a new quarterback in Sam Hartman last year, started well out in Ireland against Navy, and then didn't go so well the most of the rest of the year. You lose Audric Estime, the running back, but you do have a running back, a filled room with some pretty good depth. It is the O-line. You have Al Golden's defense, which I love, but that offensive line and now the injury, that's going to be a real question mark.
It is. The wide receiver room, though, I was listening to our buddy Pete Sampson over at The Independent, great podcast for Notre Dame fans out there, and all the talk about the wide receiver room, which is new for Notre Dame fans. You got Chris Mitchell, the transfer in. You've got Bo Collins as well.
Bo Collins.
But it seems like it's the incumbent, Jaden Greathouse, who's making a lot of waves during camp. So that's a name to keep an eye on as we head into the fall in a wide receiver room that's going to need to be drastically better as the offensive line comes online. Defense should be one of the top 5 in college football. That group looks sick so far through camp. So excited to see that one. Jesse, who else are we looking at here?
All right, Oklahoma making the jump to the SEC, and they have a tough schedule. A lot of nationally ranked opponents going to be faced for them. So over or under 16.5?
Ooh. Wow.
I'll go under in this initial one. I think Oklahoma is interesting. Now, losing their entire offensive line going into this season, and Jesse mentioned the schedule. You're on the road at Auburn. You've got Texas and Red River the week after, or excuse me, 2 weeks after that. You get the bye before that one. But at Ole Miss, at LSU, at Missouri, who could be a live team this year again in the SEC, and then home versus Alabama late in the season right before that LSU one. The schedule certainly going to baptize them early on coming into this conference. That being said, Brent Venables' defense, I think, should be a lot closer to what we'd seen in the past, and that's certainly a guy that saw plenty of SEC action when they were winning titles at Clemson.
I think they'll be under it in the initial ranking, but I think they'll be over it at the end of the season. I think they're going to have a tough go of it, switching conferences with the holes that they have to fill.
All right, Jesse, one more here, and then we'll get out of this. What do we got?
Yeah, let's talk about the national runners-up. Let's talk about Washington. Are they even going to crank the rankings at all? I want to know if they're going over or under 25.5. Obviously, they lost a ton of key players, Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze. So what do we think?
Yeah, UW was not represented in the first coaches poll, and Dad, I think that's going to be the same here. This is a cautionary tale of what can happen in the portal era. All of that success from last year, and now this isn't without precedent. TCU went to the national championship 2 years ago, got walloped by Georgia, and then lost a lot of their guys to the NFL. Max Duggan and a lot of the core of that roster, Quentin Johnston outside, and then followed that up by being the team that lost to Colorado and helped coronate them. So I think just with the sheer volume of coaching talent, and Jed Fisch's a good coach. We saw what he did with Arizona, but the fact that Noah Fafita and a lot of that core didn't come with him, I think is going to inhibit what they can do year one.
You just don't know. I mean, it's such a change of a roster, not Colorado-esque in year one under Deion Sanders, but still a change of the roster and missing big-time players. I could see him. I would go over. I think they're going to be left out of the top 25.
Yeah, you look at that roster, that offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award last year, 4 different guys coming in, transfers that are going to try and jumpstart that group as everyone there jumped ship or went to the NFL. The wide receiver room that had a bunch of pros in it now, all of those guys are gone as well. Will Rogers comes over of Mississippi State fame to try and man the helm, a guy that was used to playing in that Mike Leach air raid offense, certainly brings a wealth of college experience there. But again, this is the difficulty that we talk about all the time right now and why teams like Ole Miss are always fascinated going into the season, what USC tried to do on defense last year of portaling in all of these players, sometimes out of necessity because the play didn't justify it, and sometimes because, hey, just like this, when you win a national championship and the coach is a huge part of the sell and you've got all this change going on amongst conferences, it does make the picture a little bit muddier.
And I think in the landscape of college football today, even though we have a lot of the same teams up there, there's a little more of the unknown because of the portal, because of guys transferring in and being no preseason games. And do you play a tough game early? Do you have an easy schedule early to try and work everything out in what would be preseason games in the NFL? I just think the landscape is different now because of the amount of new players that you have to assimilate to a team in preseason in August before the season starts. I think that makes the prognostication a little bit tougher. Even though, like I said, you see the same number of teams to start the season, the Blue Bloods at the top, but let's see where they finish. I think we'll get, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Oregons right near the top, but, could there be question marks there? And then after them, where does the jumbled group end up?
Yeah, and that jumbled group, by the way, that's going to include the Group of 5 champion and some teams further down in some of these Power 4 conferences now becomes more relevant overall in the national conversation surrounding the expanded playoffs this year. So those are names that you're going to have to spend a lot more time with, as we probably just spend the first month of the season trying to learn everyone's names anyway and doing he's still in the league or he's still in college football, looking around at all of the jumbled mess that has become roster construction in the year of our Lord 2024. Again, get that money, get it how you live, but it is also making it very hard to keep track of everybody because I am an old now. Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. We usually, around these parts on Mondays, come up and do our all-weekend team, honorable mention, second team, and first team, awarding some of the best participants from the weekend that was. But, Dad, we just finished up an Olympics where, bear in mind, we tied China for the most gold medals in the Olympics. We beat everyone's ass in terms of total medals overall, did the USA. And so gold, silver, and bronze have kind of been the flavor of the day. So we thought, looking back on the Olympics, we might as well give out our bronze, gold, and silver in terms of performance overall. And it was a big ball of wax, 329 medal events, over 9,000 athletes, lots of great choices to choose from here. So we're going to go bronze, silver, and gold for our hardware on the all-weekend team. Dad, in place of honorable mention, second team and first team. And I want to start off bronze. I'll go with USA track and field, Dad, overall. I think coming into this Olympics, you had redemption stories like Sha'Carri Richardson, who had what happened before the Tokyo Olympics obscures so much of her public reputation. Her coming back, being able to get on the medal stand, having that iconic picture from the relay of her looking back at some of the participants as she goes on to help win there. And then a guy like Noah Lyles, who I know fell short in the 200 meter, but winning the 100 meter, getting that title of the fastest man alive, and Dad really working hard to insert himself as a future star in this sport, trying to capitalize on this momentum somewhat abrasively. And I don't know if it's going to work for him because of the way he's gone about it, but he clearly, as he stated in a Time magazine article that I saw the other day, wants to be the face of this and clearly tried to use this opportunity to do just that.
Yeah, I don't know if he went about it the right way, but time will tell. My bronze is going to be a little more specific in the track and field. It's going to be Cole Hawker and Quincy Hall. Cole Hawker, the 1,500 meter winner, when the Netherlands and the Great Britain runner were having a battle, a Twitter battle, a verbiage battle, let alone a battle on the track about who was better, Hawker comes in and wins the thing. I mean, it was just really an incredible run by him. And then Quincy Hall showed us that you can lose all aspects of form and style when you're just digging for a gold medal. His digging and want to win the 400 coming from behind on the last straightaway was absolutely incredible. So those two get my bronze.
Yeah, again, the U.S. track and field umbrella contains a lot in here. And, Dad, you said it for Noah Lyles about if he'll be successful or not. Positioning yourself against a bunch of the popular American athletes. And in that Time article, he bristled at the notion when Adidas tried to invite him to Anthony Edwards' shoe release. Why are you treating me, a six-time world champion, like someone who should be lesser than an NBA player who hasn't won a title yet and done all of that stuff? Seems like a bold strategy for a guy who is not Usain Bolt dominant enough to be singular in this sport yet. He's been great. He's certainly the best of what we have to offer as Americans. But then to do that against sports that are just more mainstream popular at this point. I'll be interested to see if he can get his hooks in to the popular zeitgeist the way that he believes he is capable of doing with his personality and his brashness that have kind of been the hallmark of the games from him.
And the personality and brashness, in my opinion, can be too much at some times. But, it works in today's world at times for sure. But I think there needs to be more dominant winning to go with it. Usain Bolt was insane, right? With his dominance in the 100, just dominance in a short race. And so he became the face of track and field. And I don't know if Noah Lyles can do that with barely winning the 100, then not winning his favorite event, the 200, and then kind of bristling at some of the other American athletes. I don't think overall bodes well to be the face of, or to be as big of a face of a sport as he thinks.
Yeah, and again, a sport that's got the sliver of our attention span that it gets already, and I don't think has any signs of that changing. Maybe he'll be successful in that, but again, I certainly have my doubts in there. And he's a guy he has accomplished more in his sport than someone like Anthony Edwards, who for some reason is infinitely more likable, and I think it's because in addition to the bleep talking, we also saw Ant be an incredible teammate, do all of this stuff. We've got more exposure, and there is that excitement about a homegrown talent in that sport in particular. So very interesting to consider overall. Dad, second team, bronze or silver medal, who you got here for your Olympic all-weekend team?
I'm going with Kristen Faulkner, who won the cycling road race. I mean, she was 31 years old. She wasn't supposed to be on the Olympic team. She didn't make the team. There was an injury somebody had to pull out, and that's the reason she got on the team. And then she goes and wins a gold in the cycling road race. So just a complete out of nowhere story of someone that's not supposed to be on the team to not only participating and being on the podium, but being on the top step of the podium and winning gold. So a name a lot of people knew going into the Olympics. Not many people knew even after she won, but they're going to get to know her more after that really incredible out of nowhere win.
And I think that's kind of what we love about the Olympics. As much as there are the big-time stars we've talked about, it's getting to know these stories that sort of get at us from out of nowhere. And that's why, for my silver medalist, Dad, I'm going to go with Alona Mar from the U.S. Women's Rugby Sevens team, who has been a viral sensation through this Olympics for her body positivity comments. She's been very TikTok popular already, millions of followers on a bunch of the social platforms. But when the U.S. won bronze in such dramatic fashion over Australia, the 95-yard ostensibly kick return that sealed the deal for them in that matchup, the financial support that poured in after that, you saw her palling around with Jason and Khaleesi, and just in general, they felt like a big part of the games after bursting onto the scene in that way, and she has been the voice for that in front of the charge for U.S. Women's Rugby Sevens.
I mean, just what her voice had been and her play had been to go along with that play, that 95-yard play. I mean, just really emphasize how big that medal was for a sport that hasn't been around on the women's side that long in the Olympics.
All right, Dad, gold medal pick. Who you got?
I'm going with the Cuban wrestler, and again, I hope I pronounce his first name, Majan Lopez. The 41-year-old Greco-Roman wrestler won 5 Olympic gold medals, 5 straight Olympics, 5 gold medals for the big man. He got very emotional after because in a way that wrestlers retire, they take their shoes off and they put them in the middle of the mat. And that's what he did. At 41 years old, it would have been unbelievable to think he'd be there for another Olympics at 45 years old. But to win 5 Olympic gold medals in a row at heavyweight and Greco-Roman, and then to have the emotion of taking your shoes off and putting them in the middle of the mat, that had to move. Anybody there watching was wrestling fans, but just it gives me chills as somebody who wrestled as well, of just time. And that's what I mean about any sport that you watch, the time these athletes put into their practice and into their specialty. It doesn't matter what sport it is. That's why I love the Olympics so much. The time I don't care from archery to paddle sports. It doesn't matter. You're putting in the time, you're putting in the effort. And this guy did it 5 friggin' times and won the gold 5 times and then retired. Really just an incredible moment for me in the Olympics.
Longevity on this stage is so interesting to consider. And a guy doing a sport that physically demanding into his 40s is insane, but we know the marker for every sport is so different. That is why my gold, my first team all weekend, has to go. We know she was the big star. I could have picked the pommel horse guy. Leon Marchand was great. There are so many deserving candidates. But Simone Biles, coming back from the twisties that took her out of the Tokyo Games that we weren't sure she would ever come back from, especially from someone who, by gymnastic standards, is certainly on the older side, and then instead left this Olympics with now overall 11 total medals, 7 gold. She's won the most Olympic medals out of any American gymnast with 10 to her name. She took gold in the team all around coming back from the twisties there. And while a lot of the gymnastic focus is right now going to be on her teammate Jordan Childs, who we can get to in the coming days as U.S. Gymnastics is ready to get litigious over her bronze from this past weekend, Simone Biles, Dad, coming back from that, the depths of what we saw in Tokyo, to now be one of the people standing in the sun this Olympics was an incredible turnaround and cements her all-time GOAT status.
We know the physical attributes you need for that sport, but overcome the mental, and then the real mental side of her overcoming the twisties from Tokyo to become the best in the world again is a really incredible moment for her.
All right, time to finish off the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, and the DraftKingsNetwork.com. If you miss any of that or are great guests, and shout out to CBS Sports HQ's NBA insider, Bill Reiter, who joined us to talk about Steve Kerr, Jason Tatum, the Steph Curry legacy fallout from this U.S. men's basketball team Olympic run. If you missed any of that live, you can check it out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. And guys, as we said, today feels like a turning of the page on the Olympics that were in Paris. We'll obviously have some stuff that spills over. I do think there's fascinating stuff about Noah Lyles going into the future. We mentioned briefly the Jordan Chiles saga that's going on with her bronze medal that is now in question, that we can unpack a little bit more tomorrow as we get more information on that. But in general, Dad, what would you say as we look ahead now? We have passed the torch to the LA games. What are you most excited about potentially for what we can see in Los Angeles in 4 years?
Well, I selfishly being on the board for USA football, flag football, because USA football has been such a big part of the development of flag football around the country, and now going to include around the world. So flag football being part of the 28 Olympics, I think is huge for men and for women. I think it's going to be a very cool thing. Even Micah Parsons is talking about skipping football for a year to be in the flag football team. And that will be interesting if there would actually be NFL players, because, again, it's the Summer Olympics. It's July and August. It's when training camp would be going on. It wouldn't miss any games. So that will be a very interesting scenario, since there are guys out who just play flag football and are part of that team as far as the women as well. So I quite honestly am really looking forward to that.
It's going to be fun to see how much the NFL chooses to embrace that. And I think that's kind of what's at stake for another sport. Listen, selfishly, am I pumped that lacrosse is going to be back in the Olympics? Hell yes. As someone that loves that sport, to get to see that represented in a country where it's gaining more and more popularity as the years go on. But its spring counterpart in baseball has a really interesting opportunity. And I saw Jeff Passan, our ESPN MLB insider buddy over at ESPN, tweet during the games, Major League Baseball needs to go all in on letting their pros play in this. And Rob Manfred said he's open to that conversation about taking more of an extended break around the All-Star gap to allow them to play in the Olympics. Because, man, we saw what happened in the World Baseball Classic and how much players loved it on home soil for a game that is described still as America's pastime. Seeing the way France, who loves rugby sevens, embraced that, saw their men's national team win over there, and created some of the best crowds and environments. Dad, I think Major League Baseball 1000% needs to go all in and make sure our best guys are representing not only the U.S., but countries all over the world in those games to give this sport the platform it deserves.
Yeah, I would hope that the MLB would take a break during the Olympics and let the best go play in their countries. I think, listen, we're past the amateurism of it all, so let's not try and do that anymore, and let's just get the best out there for every country. And we know it's a world game is baseball. So I would agree. Hopefully they'll do that. And quite honestly, I look forward to cricket. Anytime I go overseas and turn on sports on a channel, it's either soccer or cricket. So I'd love to watch some cricket and learn more about it. I think that would be a lot of fun.
That game gets buck. Shout out to softball that's going to have great facilities, but unfortunately, like we saw with the surfers who got to hang out in Tahiti, softball is going to have to do their leg from Oklahoma City. So all the people coming from all over the world that thought they were going to see Los Angeles and be in traffic on the 405 are going to get some good down-home Midwestern loving. Jesse, speaking of love, let's get to that. Blake Griffin helping usher in some love this weekend.
Yeah, Peyton Pritchard got married. He got married to social media influencer Emma McDonald over the weekend. And Jaylen Brown was there for the wedding, and he posted a video on his Instagram story of who was the officiant, and it was none other than Blake Griffin, out here getting people married. Didn't have that on my bingo card. So he ended his career with the Celtics in 2023. And so pretty funny just to see him out here officiating the wedding, and a testament to how cool he is if, Peyton Pritchard's asking him to do that for him.
Oh, yeah. Blake Griffin, Dad, has been a man of many talents for a while. Obviously burst on the scene going back to Oklahoma in his early days with the Clippers as this springboard of incredible athleticism, but he's a guy that's done stand-up comedy. We've seen him in a bunch of commercials. Like, he's got the juice in front of the microphone. So yeah. I am the least surprised of anyone on earth that he would be a baller efficient for a wedding, especially a wedding full of as much heart and hustle as I'd imagine Peyton Pritchard's wedding was full of.
So just how now you officiated your sister Sydney's wedding with her husband Ben. How difficult is it for a, lack of a better term, a layperson to be able to officiate a wedding and have it like be real?
Well, I mean, real is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, if you're someone that's hung up on this being a sacrament and all that, like, yeah, you're going to have to do that elsewhere. But in terms of just going through, you hit a couple of the beats in there. You obviously want to get him to the vows. They're the star of the show, not you. And for Blake Griffin, and Peyton Pritchard said, we begged Blake to do this. They wanted him at the helm for this. You still, even if you're Blake and as the officiant, you're trying not to make yourself the center of attention. So it's a chance to get creative. I was using movie quotes instead of Bible verses. You inject a little bit of levity when you can, but in general, again, you want to make sure that this is about the bride and groom. Keep the main thing would be my advice to anybody that's going out there and trying to get into the efficient game.
Did you have
what's
to get
the process you have to go through?
Yeah, did you have to get like a thing online?
A certificate
you can
online?
Go on and become like, you can technically go online and become like a minister at certain places that'll give you those. I don't want to shout out the place that I got mine from because I found out after that they kind of suck. So I'm not going to give them the love. But no, you don't really need that. Like, shout out to Father Eric, who's the priest at the church in Arizona that we always went to, who actually, like, in the church married my sister and her husband. He actually left space on the marriage certificate for me to sign on there, even though I don't think my signature counts for anything. But I have technically signed the marriage certificate as the person who officiated the wedding, in addition to the priest that did it for the church. So again, all of this is as official as you want it to be. Again, it's a wedding. I had friends that got married on the beach this weekend. I have friends that married on a mountaintop in Colorado last weekend. The world is your oyster. I appreciate the people who need this to be a religious ceremony for them. All good. Do what makes you happy. But if you're going to have someone like me or Blake Griffin officiating your wedding, then you only care so much about those things.
True. That's true.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that.
Let's get to the third, Jesse, and finish this off. What do we got?
Yeah, so we have a Game of Thrones passport situation, which I didn't really realize I would be saying those words today. So a woman was devastated after her daughter's passport application was rejected because she was named after a Game of Thrones character. What was her name, you might ask? Khaleesi. So 6-year-old Khaleesi originally had her passport denied because Warner Brothers had the trademark for it. It turns out that was all nonsense, and basically the office gave an apology and they were like, oh, it's a trademark, but not for names, it's for goods and services or whatever. So it all got figured out, but the mother, Lucy, of the child Khaleesi, went on to say, like, I think if I hadn't put this on social media, it wouldn't have gotten resolved so quickly, but I think it's hilarious that a mother would be like, hello, my name is Lucy, this is my child, Khaleesi. Do those things go together?
Mother? Does that make her the mother of dragons? I mean, technically, Khaleesi was the mother of dragons, so I guess that would be the daughter.
Grandmother of dragons?
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I'm bad enough at remembering the names from Game of Thrones that I'm impressed they caught that. That's like the one notable one. There's like 5 games. It's like Tyrion Lannister, her, Jaime, Cersei, and then after that and Jon Snow. It's kind of a crapshoot if I was ever going to remember these. So that was her mistake, is picking the one that people actually knew.
Yeah.
And there's, when you just name your kid something like that, this not nearly as outlandish as some others of parents think it's, oh, let's name our kid this, and then that kid's got to go through life, especially growing up at a young age with that name. Now, hopefully they get a nickname or something, so, it's not like Apple forever. So I don't know. I think parents get above their skis a little bit sometimes on naming their kids.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey man, after this weekend, LeSteph Durant Golic is in the running for my brother's next kid based on the performances from this weekend. You gotta pay homage to the greats that got it done. Khaleesi, primetime player, LeBron, KD, and Steph bringing home gold for America. There's gonna be a bunch of little ones running around after all this. You can name one of your kids after us if you want to. Download, subscribe, rate, review, and let us know if you did it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.